So, welcome, Sharon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I woke up a couple of hours ago, um, over here in the time difference in Canada. So I'm good. I'm good. I woke up in a really hot room.
Okay. Good. I don't know what to say about
Maybe
that.
saying I'm good doesn't
AC.
fit the rest of what I've just said.
No. But I was going to ask, have you finally recovered from jet lag?
Yeah, it took me a while. It always takes me so long to recover from jet lag. I don't know why. There's something with my system that just likes to be a bit messed up, I think. Like it takes so long, but it's always worse when I go back to London. That takes
Definitely.
me longer to recover from. So I think it took me like, I don't know, not that long, like 5 days maximum.
Wow, that's so long.
That's still long, but
That's so
like
long.
on the way back, like trust me, when I go back to London, it'll be like 2 weeks of jet lag.
That's an excuse to stay in bed and have hot chocolate, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Definitely. So I have to ask, how's life in Vancouver? Because you're there for the next 3 months.
Six
What,
months.
6 months? Oh my goodness. Okay. What's your
Yeah.
plans in Vancouver? By the way, if you eat meat, they have the best sushi. Like,
I
hands
don't eat
down.
meat, but they do have great vegan sushi here as well.
Okay, to go
Yeah.
because it's the place to have it. You know.
Yeah. It's actually I was actually surprised with what the restaurant scene is like here because my cousin's a chef.
Okay.
So he's very much into like, oh, there's this new place, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's a really cool place for like finding new foods. But yeah, I'm here for 6 months.
Wow.
I'm mostly gonna be chilling
Oh,
with
lovely.
family. I have a lot of family here. So I used to come here a lot when I was younger. I used to do summer holidays. Granddad's on the island, so I'd go over to the island and things like
Oh,
that.
so lucky.
And then like my cousin and my aunties are like on the like mainland. So yeah, I just want to spend time here chilling, writing, um, and also like think about like the next steps of my journey, because I'm kind of sick and
Mm.
tired of London. I feel like I don't know, I've just never really been a Londoner. Like I've always been a
Okay.
Londoner, like technically, but like I had like a big love for London. I don't know. I just
You should go to the Mediterranean.
oh
Italy's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Greece, Spain, yeah, but like the Mediterranean, like by the
Mm,
coast, and life is really chilled out. If you're looking for chilled out and like
that's it,
cocktail,
right? Yeah,
that's what
that's
you
it.
need.
So I became really aware of how London was stressing me out from just simply the way it is. And when I came back to Vancouver, that little bit of slowness it has just
Mm,
completely calmed me. And
definitely.
I realized I needed that in my life. Like I need something like this, where it's like a city, it's still busy, there's still so much happening, but like it's that much slower.
Yeah, like because I go to Toronto because I've got family there. And for me, the one thing I do love is being spoiled by my brothers. Because I'm like the baby sister who's annoying and doesn't shut up. So I love that. And then number two is my aunt just cooks for me, and the food is amazing. And
Mm.
it was really curious because I met my husband for the first time before we got married, and my aunt was just like looking at Carla saying, "Oh, like he's so beautiful, Anisha," and I was like, "Mm-hmm." Yeah, because the other sister in London, that was my response. I was like, yeah. And the other sister in London, when she met him, she was like, oh, Anisha, like, he's just so beautiful. And I went, you're so very different in characters, but you both think the
Mhm.
same.
Yeah.
And she was like holding his hand, sitting on his lap, and I'm like,
Wow.
I don't really think you should be doing that. So me and my cousin were embarrassed, and like Carlos was like, is like all your aunts like this? And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Oh my god.
They'll kill you. They'll eat you alive. So like, so bringing on to my next question.
Mhm.
Your newly published memoir, Burning My Roti. By the way, I love the title.
Thank you.
What, before I continue, why did you call it Burning My Roti? Because I've burnt a lot in my entire, like my whole life. I've burnt loads, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna order takeaway.
So like, yeah, so it's named after my magazine, Burnt Roti.
Yeah.
And the reason I came up with Burnt Roti is um Well, okay, there is a bit of a story. Okay, so when I was young, I would it would be the normal kind of like thing, like, you know, mum would be like, you know, you have to make the perfect roti, you know, we need to teach you how to be a good housewife, etc. And I'm like 13 being like, what? And so like, you know, they'd put you in front of the tava and they'd get all the flour ready and you'd make the atta. And then they're just like, okay, and now you roll it out and now you do this. And I was just so sick and tired of the concept that I had to make roti while my brother sat there just like reading comic books. And I was just like, this isn't cool. And also, I don't want to cook for someone. I don't even want to cook for myself. Like, that's what you're here for, mum. Like, that was kind of what I was thinking at the moment. So, like, I was just like, no, this is not cool. So I would intentionally burn them so that mum would then, yeah, I would intentionally burn. Eventually, mum was just like, oh my God, this woman cannot cook. Like, this is really embarrassing. So she was just like, go sit next to Raj. Like, don't bother like trying to make roti. And that's how I got out of making roti for a very long time. And I think it was my first kind of like step into activism without me realizing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but now I make the perfect roti.
I'm impressed because I hated making rotis. I hated it. So my one summer, my mom was like, right, that's it. You're going up to Preston and you're going to learn from my sister-in-law. And I was like, you up? Is that summer holidays? I was like, I don't want to learn it. So I would have been about your age, like 13. And then I have this cousin, and like a lot of us don't like to cook with her because she's always like shouting at us. And she's like, oh my God, you've not cooked it right, or you're burning it. And I went, do you know what? Do it yourself. And I would leave the kitchen. I went, oh, I'm going to sit, watch TV. But I remember my mum saying to me, I don't want to teach you to cook because I want you to be an independent woman. Because she actually learned to cook from her in-laws. Because my mum did a lot of sports. So my grandparents are like, no, you don't need to learn to cook. You can carry on with your sports. But when she married, she was like, yeah, I really need to learn to cook. But for me and my sister, she was like, no, you don't need to. But then unfortunately, she passed away and it kind of got stumbled onto me. And trust me, I've made some really bad boo-boos, like cooking, like over nutmegging or burning, like burning the ceiling with dal. And I'll be like, nice. There's a reason why I didn't like yeah. There was like an inner reason of just burn everything because you shouldn't be learning to cook. But now I don't make rotis ever. So oh
my God. I taught myself because I was just like, because I like eating roti, and I got to a stage where I was also like, I'm an independent person and want to cook for myself and not for someone else. So I learned how to make roti for myself, basically, eventually. Yeah.
I should get back into it, but I'm like, tomorrow, which is never. So your book focuses on taboo. Okay. So you know my podcast is called Naughty Bites, and it's a bit of a pun, okay? What's your guilty pleasure?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I have an answer for this. So the only reason it's a guilty pleasure is like the ill come clear. So basically I became a vegetarian about 4 years ago, and then I went vegan about 3 years ago because I realized that dairy was affecting my eczema. Also, ethics, sustainability, the earth, morals, all of that stuff as well. That came secondary, if I'm going to be honest, because I was just like, oh my God, my eczema. So I don't eat dairy. Like I don't eat I drink oat milk. I don't eat eggs and like etc. But I find it difficult to call myself a vegan because I can't stop eating paneer. I'm so obsessed. Like, why does it taste so good? It's not my fault. It's the fault of the paneer gods. Like, it tastes too good. So I can't actually call myself a vegan because I get so much guilt for saying that because I eat so much paneer, like so much.
But it's amazing.
More now that I turned vegan. I don't know.
Maybe it's a craving inside of you going, eat me. Like, you know, it's like getting my belly. Your belly knows you want it. And it's like, eat me. It's like Homer Simpson salivating.
Yeah, 100%. I tried to make substitute paneer with tofu once, and it didn't hit the spot at all. I was like, yeah, this is just a tofu dish. It's not. So yeah, that's my guilty pleasure. It's paneer as a vegan.
So can I call you a little like part-time flexitarian?
Like it? Yes.
Yeah? Yes, definitely. It's a part-time lover affair.
I don't know why, but it makes me sound flexible as well. So that's why.
I'm thinking yoga. I don't know what I'm thinking.
I'm not flexible at all. I can't even do yoga. So if someone has the vision of me of being flexible, that makes me happier.
So, so actually, like your book focuses on taboo, so cultural identity, body hair, colorism, etc. Your book resonates with a lot of people. So when I was thinking body hair, I was like, and cultural identity, I was like, oh my god, like that's how I feel. And you know, when you share posts, I'm like, how the hell? Because you've got so much courage. I'm like, I admire you for it, because I wouldn't. As a teenager, I hated body hair. Like, you know, as an Asian, your parents are like, you're not getting waxed, you're not having laser. So at school, I used to get called Spider. And now I'm like, I hate, you know, when you look back and you're like, oh my god, did I have sideburns? And did I have like a, you know, it was difficult growing up as a teenager.
Yeah.
But like, what made you start your journey? Because everything you've written in like all the chapters, it's thought-provoking, but also like everyone's like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. You've written a book that goes, this is my life as well, which I did a lot of. So I was like, oh, that's so true, and I did that.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you. That was the intention. I was hoping that people would get that kind of feeling within them as well when they read it, because it's so individual, it's so personal when you write something, and you still are kind of like, you victimize yourself and you find it very lonely, like, you know, when you go through something. So when other people are like, yeah, same, you're just like, oh god, thank god. Thank god it's
true.
But I think my journey with my body hair came with my journey of being more open with my queerness. So when I started kind of, I guess, living life as my true self, and I guess that kind of allowed me to like reject those kind of standards laid down by like cis hetero men, because they were no longer the people that I wanted to be in my life. That kind of changed the way I saw myself and the way that I wanted to reflect myself into the world, because I was like, as a queer woman, if I don't have to reach those standards to be considered valid, then I can do what I want. And it was just so liberating to be like, actually, I don't care about cis like hetero men and their standards, because it's genuinely like, I literally don't care about anything they think or say, because it doesn't affect my life. It doesn't affect the way I see myself, you know. And it did for ages, and that is still ingrained in you. Like, it's still an echo in your head, because it's so hard to unlearn these kind of things. But like, my everyday isn't for them, you know. So like my body, I mean, it wasn't for them anyway, really. I mean, your body is for yourself, but the way you're taught is that it's for someone else, right? Like, you know, you have to look for someone else. And then, so there's steps of unlearning. So the first step of unlearning was, it's not for them. And then you go through it's not for anyone. It's genuinely for yourself, right? And so as I was going through these steps of unlearning, I kind of just became more comfortable just existing the way I do. But it's been really, really hard and really long. Like, there have been, like, I haven't removed arm hair in a very long time, to be fair, like, well before I went into the journey of like body hair. I've got these massive mosquito bites I just saw on my arms. Sorry, they're very distracting in this conversation. So like, so my arm hair was the first one my arm hair was the first one that I never removed, because I was kind of just like, it was just easier for me to just sit there with arm hair, I think, than with hair anywhere else, because I was like, everyone has arm hair, mine's just a bit thicker, but I can still see it on my friends, right? I can still see their arm hair. So that was the first time I was like, okay, let's just do that. And then armpit hair was the next one, and that was genuinely because it's just such fucking honestly, it was bleep. It was genuinely because it was just it's just hard work to keep shaving your armpits, because they grow back. Like, mine grew back like hours later. I'd get little like
the same
under my arm. I was like, what's the point? Like, what is the it doesn't look any better. Like, my shaved armpits don't look any better than my unshaved armpits, like, to my eye. And it was like, what was it for then? It was for, like, you know, the fact that men said you shouldn't have it. I was like, no, hold on, but like, it looks the same to me, or it looks no different to me, so why should I do it for them? And then, like, literally just 2 days ago was the first time I went in public with unshaved legs to a lake and went swimming.
I saw, and I was like, check you out. I
That
was
was
loving it.
That was the stage that I wasn't sure I was able to get at. And I went with basically my group of like queer friends in Vancouver, and they just made me feel really safe and stuff. And no one looked, no one cared.
They don't.
They don't care.
But it's
And it
really
was like,
curious. Sorry.
sorry, say that again.
No, but it's curious because I think Indian society, you know, South Asian society, it's like this whole thing of I remember in India, they're like, oh my God, you've got hairy legs. And it's this whole thing of like, you know, you go to India, you get waxed and you're like, they make you feel so rubbish for having facial hair or this hair or whatever. And I think South Asian society makes you feel rubbish about it.
Yeah.
And they make you feel like, you know, no man wants you. But I'm thinking, South Asian men are really hairy. So I'm thinking, why don't you get waxed? Like, why don't you go through the same stuff that we have to go through as women?
So hairy.
They are, right? It was like,
like my brother's back hair, like it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's like it's like swirly and gorgeous. I'm like, why aren't you?
It's true, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's because, you know, we our value is the way we look compared to men. You know, when they say to us, like, you know, you have to be a certain way, it's because our value is aligned to that certain way instead of how, you know, we're made to exist. Whereas men can just exist however.
Exactly.
And it's always been the way. But it like hair removal came down from like marketing, you know. It was just a way of like selling razors, because they saturated the market with men and their facial hair, and because like mustaches was such a big thing, they were just like, oh God, like what do we do next? And so they started marketing it to women, and in a really racialized way. So it was done in a way that was like, don't look like these indigenous people. And it was actually like a lot of marketing said savages by doing this. And so it was sold to European women. Razors were sold to European women to not look like us, essentially. And then we were sold that through colonial like mind thought. Like we were then taught that that was the way to be, you know, don't be yourself, be the white one. So yeah, there's a lot of unlearning with kind of like the racial side of it as well.
Yeah, because it's a big psychological thing. It's really difficult to break through it because you're taught one way. When you're going the opposite way, it's really hard to break down your barriers. Everything you've learned. Definitely. Which is led me to my next question, which is I'm going to talk about Instagram. So you openly talk about suffocating beauty within the South Asian community. But your journey is about loving yourself, you know, appreciating yourself, loving yourself, and not really caring about other people's opinions because it's your body, your decision. What has the journey been like for you? Just not in terms of body hair, but in everything, like, you know, your sexuality, your colorism, mental health, everything. Like, what's our journey been like?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The thing is I'm attention seeking, and I'm really
it's a good thing.
Yeah, well,
it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing if you're confident.
No, it's not a bad. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. Basically, I go through journeys of things of like self-discovery, of like things I figure out about myself, which I think, oh, maybe other people are figuring it out as well or whatever. So that's why I write about it on Instagram. But it's genuinely are just moments of me saying, like, look at me, I'm going through this. And, you know, the hope is that other people will turn around and say, yeah, same, you know, same, we're going through this as well. Or it's to come out of that loneliness that you feel, like, especially when it comes to mental health, you know, when you're open about your mental health and someone sends you a message, suddenly a DM being like, yeah, I went through the exact same thing last year and this is the journey I went through, then you're just like, oh my God, that loneliness is then extended to that person. And then you feel like a joint connection. And that isolation you get with mental health is one of the biggest things I suffered from. You know, it was the whole, like, you know, you victimize yourself as well. So not only are you dealing with your mental health where you're spiraling or, you know, you're going through these really big dips, you're also isolating yourself by saying you're the only person that's dealing with this. You're the one with the worst amount of body hair. You're the one that's, like, you know, being mistreated the most or whatever it is, right? So these kind of like posts of these kind of like, you know, conversations I have is a reach out to people to be like, you know, I don't want to feel lonely. Like, I hope there's other people out there that have the same thing, and then when there is, then you have that connection, and it helps you like move past a lot of the moments that you are kind of like suffering in. So the journey has mostly been that. So every time now that I, you know, do like a vulnerable post or something, it's the hope that someone then reaches out and says, same, you know, me too, and we can like hold hands virtually together through this process, kind of thing.
Definitely, because I wish there was someone like you for after having birth as well, because there's loads of women that are like Caucasian, but for South Asian women, it's been really difficult. So, you know, my body changed a lot after pregnancy. And the one thing I suffered with was hair growth and discoloration of my skin. And there were moments I was having a mental breakdown. I was like, why does it happen to me? And thankfully, I had the support of my husband, and Carlos was like, it's just, I can't see it. You're just over exaggerating. But, you know, like, it would have been nice to have someone where you can go virtually, oh God, it's not just me that's going through this as well. And you know, everything that your body was isn't. And then it's like a mental thing. And then having a child, you're like, do I feel this much anxiety? I'm scared of everything. I don't sleep. I don't do this. And it's nice to have that whole virtual connection with somebody else going through the exact same thing. And you feel like there are other people out there. And that's what your Instagram for me represents, you know, in so many different areas of your life. You're sharing it with the thought of, there'll be other people that will go through this. And, you know, if someone is there that will DM me and go, thank you, I also felt like this, you're not alone.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And the thing is, it's so nice because you see, it's hard to find because of like algorithms and stuff, but there are people out there having conversations, and it's about like trying to manage to find them somehow. But like, I think like digital connections are a lot easier than in-person connections because there's still so much anxiety with like admitting things out loud in person. Like, for example, me posting pictures of like my leg hair, which I was doing well before I actually went out in public with my leg hair, because those are two different journeys. So I think having that digital support group where you reach out or you make a post and other people reach out to you is an easier step to then start doing it in person and to the people around you. And I think that's really vital.
No, definitely. And I think one of the things I love about you as well is that you've openly spoke about compassion and empathy for humanity, but in the sense of welcoming other people regardless of their cultural identity.
Yeah.
And sexuality, to name a few. What has the support been like for you? Because you don't call yourself lesbian or gay or whatever, you call yourself queer. Has the support been there for you? Because I think it's really hard for someone to come out because a lot of people, there's still that stigma around it. What's it been like?
You know what, like super interesting. And so I get asked this often, but you know what's really, what I didn't realize until very recently is I didn't really look properly into what the journey was actually like. I would go like, oh yeah, mum would say this and dad said this and then my brother did this. Like, you know, that's not the actual journey. That's just a couple of conversations, right? But the actual journey was me supporting myself. And it was really interesting because I continued to do that thing that I did with my mental health where I isolated myself from it, you know. So then I would tell myself like, okay, so Sharon, you need to start a queer event. You need to like, you know, start a pride event, like all this kind of stuff, as if like there aren't other people out there that'll be able to like be part of the journey with me. And it was that whole thing where you create this loneliness around it. And I did have like a lot of like different queer groups thanks to like, you know, already the journey I'd gone on with Burning My Roti and just like, you know, not being openly queer, but like obviously being queer. And so like already having like groups of people in the community. But yeah, there was still a lot of isolation. And even though there was a lot of acceptance, it didn't mean that there was internal acceptance for a very long time. There was also a lot of self-doubt because it's so kind of ingrained in you that you shouldn't be this way, that you start going, oh, am I, or am I just rebelling? Am I just trying to piss off mum a bit more, you know? And then you literally never want to be with a man again. So like, obviously like there's something there. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
And so there's also like, the journey of like the terminology you use and how you identify yourself, because your sexuality or your gender identity is just an ongoing journey. That's something that you are going through as a self-discovery forever, and that is because we are constantly still learning and understanding and unpacking, you know, because there's so much that's been kind of told that this is the way of life, and then now we're realizing that we shouldn't be listening to a couple of old white scientists back in the day saying that this is what it's meant to be. That like the reason I now say queer is because it's easier for me to like identify as queer without having any questions, you know, without people being like, yeah, well, you know, if I said bisexual, people would be like, oh, right, so you probably will like end up with a man or something, you know. Whereas the reality is I'm not actually sexually attracted to men. And I realized that a lot of my history was just like almost like forced heteronormative kind of lifestyle where I was told that you had to. And so that's why none of my relationships worked out. Shocking.
I love how you said that. Was really like sarcastic. You are shocking.
Yeah, like what do you expect, Sharon? You're very gay. So like, yeah, I feel like it's an ongoing journey of like, you know, trying to come out of that loneliness more and more. But because it's not only isolating from like, you know, the side of sexuality and that kind of side of it culturally, it's quite isolating as well. But I try and teach myself as much as possible through history. So like I came to a space not that long ago where I realized it was an Indian culture that's stigmatizing me. It's the colonial British culture that's stigmatizing me through their reign, you know, because even though like, you know, sexualities and gender identities weren't like the most accepted, they existed through history, were written about. And like, you know, our art in Indian art is very gay.
It is.
Our sculptures everywhere on like, you know,
erotic as well.
Yeah, we're super
erotic. Yeah, because I remember growing up. Did you ever have those like cloth paintings of one bloke and you've got it? I'm trying to explain this to Carla. And you see the nipples. Yeah, it's like nipples, and you see on the boob, and you see one man and like a harem of women. Like Indian culture is very sexualized. It's very, and everyone thinks about sex. Definitely.
And it's because it came hand in hand with spirituality. So like our culture is a very spiritual culture, and with that is like, you know, our understanding of the earth and our existence alongside the earth. And so it wasn't like these humans were better than these other humans, and you know, and then we live on the earth. It's like we all are kind of like collaborating with earth in a certain way. So it wasn't kind of like set up the way that the global north set it up. And so I think then when obviously there was still a lot of chaos as well with sexuality and gender identity, because there is still like humans are still like awful people most of the time.
Very judgmental, but yes.
But then when the colonial reign came in, that's kind of when like, you know, it was criminalized to be homosexual, and it was aligned to bestiality and pedophilia. So things like that, and that was a British law that they then put into the Indian law. So it was legislation that was moved over that didn't actually make sense within our culture, but that became ingrained in a lot of Indian mindsets, and so did a lot of the colonial rule. You know, you see a lot of Indian families acting a certain way off the back of what's been ingrained in them from the way they grew up.
And I think an example of that is what you see in Goodness Gracious Me. It's like a set of it, and you're like, oh god, that's so true. It's
Goodness Gracious Me was like a turning point in my life. It was truly a turning point. Oh my god, I still like every now and then find the episodes on YouTube to watch.
They're funny because you really do laugh at it, you know, but it's true.
It's on point. It's absolutely perfect. The Kapoors that were like the Coopers.
That's it.
It was just like, oh my god, this is like every auntie, every like middle class auntie I know. It's crazy. And
it's true because like, you know, growing up, a lot of my friends were like, I identify myself as English because we're born in England, but you know, ethnicity, we're Hindus, whatever. But growing up is really curious. I didn't have many Indian friends, and I was bullied by the Indian friends for being like the Coopers, but it's not because I was like the Coopers. It's just because my mum didn't really want me. She wanted me to discover myself, not
Mhm.
be raised in a way that you have to be Indian. You got to do the fasting. You got to do like. It was none of that growing up, and that's what I loved about growing up.
Yeah.
So when university came, my friends knew that I was always. Actually, they were going to find out now, but like, I think as humans, maybe it's a cultural identity. I don't know. Naturally, as humans, we should be attracted to both. You know,
Mm.
man or woman. You know, or neither or whatever. You know.
Mhm.
So I went through a journey of discovery through university. So my cousin was also at uni with me and is a year older. So he knew about everything I got up to. And
Yeah.
not once did he ever judge me. There's also that one cousin.
There's always that
And
one cousin. I'm
that
living
one
with him
cousin.
right now. Yeah. There's
The
always
one
that
that
one cousin.
supports you and that knows
Yeah.
everything about you. And you know, uni for me was a discovery. And I remember I had some pictures in my like halls of residence. And my dad once came over and was like, Are you lesbian, Anisha? And I was like, because I kiss girls does not make me a lesbian, but
Mm.
what does it matter if I am?
Yeah.
You know, why does it matter if I am?
Yeah.
And it was a discovery stage for me. And, you know, with Carlos now, we can openly talk about, oh my God, that woman is absolutely beautiful. And I find women and men sexually attractive because
Yeah.
it's human nature. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't find Indian men attractive. I don't know what it is. But I've got
You know, a lot of the time. So I've had this conversation with a few people about why a lot of Indian women aren't attracted to Indian men, and it's because of it's the kind of like identities we've been given growing up. So like, you know, there's the Indian woman and she does all this, and then she basically then becomes the Indian boy's mother when she marries him. And so we've been taught that that's the way it's meant to be. And then the son has always been like, yeah, cool, I can't wait to get married to my next mother, kind of thing.
It's true. It's true. Oh
That
my
is not
goodness.
attractive at all. That is not attractive.
No.
But like, we've been told that that's what we're meant to do. That's how it's meant to go. And so when these boys don't know how to use a washing machine, we're meant to be like, oh, this is how you do it. Oh, I'll do it for you, darling. Like, you know, that kind of stuff. And that is literally the biggest turnoff for me.
It is.
So I think that kind of, and it's not that like all Indian men are like that, because obviously there's actually a ton that I've met that aren't actually like that. But what we've been taught and what we've been kind of exposed to is that. So what we then end up doing is when we see Indian men is we instantly are like, I don't want to be your mother, without even like, you know, really giving them a time of day. We're just like, I don't want to be your mother, like, because it's basically taught to us as what we were meant to do.
No,
so that's the biggest thing that like, that's the biggest kind of like conflict that we have. And I hope that's kind of being unlearned. And like, I hope that
I hope so.
Generationally. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too, because it's kind of, it's really difficult then, because like we have a whole culture of like of Indian men being like desexualized and like not considered, you know, as like, you know, valuable and enough to be kind of like someone to be with. And that's because of the way that, you know, they've been taught to live.
It's curious to say that, because when I dated, well, they never worked because my heart wasn't in it, but also as well, I did it because maybe it was the right thing to do, but it never worked for me. And I was compared the guys I dated to my cousins, because my cousins were very independent. They cook, they clean, they do the laundry, they're very independent. And I was like, why are they like that? And these were the guys that wanted to marry someone like their mother. And I'm like, separation, like, you know, it's a bit icky. And for me, it's like, I was like, this is not for me. And then, you know, so I was in Canada a couple of years back, and we went to a bar, and for the first time I went out with my cousins, because they were a lot older than me. And there was this guy, and he was like a French barman. And literally, Carlos did not exist. And I just the natural reaction, I was like speaking in French and like doing this, and I was like
twirling your hair like, hi.
Literally, it was just an involuntary action. And then my cousin was like, hello, and Carlos is here. And Carlos was like, shall I do the French accent? And I was like, no, like, don't ruin it for me. And then my cousin said, you've got a type, your type is Mediterranean. And I went, actually yes, because my first love, teenage love, was this guy in France. My mom used to send me on a French exchange, and his name was Wilfred. Horrible name, but He
I
was
was going to
so
say that's not
beautiful.
a good name.
Not a good name. Unfortunately for him, Wilfred sounds like a grandfather. But
Yeah.
I had a thing, and I think from my age, I was like, it was Mediterranean, and but it was nice to share that part of my life with my cousins because they've never seen that part of my life. They just see me as this rebellious teenager, and now they see me, they were like, "Ah!" But it's true. I believe there's a reason why for me, I've never been like I've tried, but they never worked. And also as well, I'm too like, you know, when someone says, "Pick up my glass, make me a cup of tea," manners and do it yourself. Why don't you make it? I get really rebellious. And
Yeah, and I think there's like so much like independence within like, you know, women. Like it's kind of, it's a fight for us to be subservient because naturally like women are quite kind of like, I don't know, we're quite powerful. We're quite kind of like, you know, independent. Like I said, like we basically birth humans. Like, you know, we are quite like an intense being that like being subservient is completely against our being. So when you're told that you have to do something, it's quite a struggle to be this kind of like, you know, servant for a man. And I see so many people rebelling against it, and even people like that are within those kind of like institutes as well, where they have married an Indian guy and they do find themselves like, you know, cooking for them or whatever. They're not happy.
I don't think so.
A lot of them aren't happy. A lot of them sit there and just moan about having to do it all.
And also, as well, I find like when you see them, they plod along. They're not living life; they're plodding along. And then I'm thinking, I don't want to plod. Life is too short. Unfortunately, it is short. But I don't want to look back and go, "Is that it? Is that all I did on this earth?" Because you know, I know people, and well, at university or growing up, they were quite rebellious. They did whatever they wanted to do. But then, as soon as they got married, it's like they became reborn again Hindus. They became so judgmental. They became like the housewives that, you know, judge you because, you know, you're not doing the whole cooking for your husband, looking after your in-laws, or, you know, fasting on a Monday or fasting on a Thursday. And a lot of the time I got called white. I literally, you're just such a coconut. And I'm like, what does that actually mean? Like, you know, and I feel like, and I wanted to say to them, because you've married, doesn't mean you're not the person you were before. Don't use it as an excuse to judge other people because you've chosen to settle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like also, you know, this nature of being called white or being called a coconut or whatever, like it's because you're not doing the things that are within the tradition, you know, that, you know, that actually I then figured out through Burning Roti. Isn't everyone like I was like, all Indian families go through this, right? And a bunch of people I know are just like, no, we didn't go through this. And I was just like, oh damn, that's interesting. Because you then truly believe that that's meant to be the way for Indian women to live this way.
But it's not.
That's how they're meant to exist. That's what they're meant to. Their life goal is to make a man happy and make the perfect roti. Like I believe that that's what like all the Indian people in the world thought. Like that's it. And then eventually I realized that like, you know, that's not a thing. Like it's a very particular bubble, I feel, of Indian culture where they're just like, you have to do this. But like I said, like, you know, being rebellious is within our nature because rebelling against nature. Because we're naturally not like that. So I think it's happening more and more now because it's become more easy. It's become easy to rebel because generationally people are changing, mindsets are changing generationally, thank God. But like also, you know, people's availability to be more open and speak about things has just skyrocketed, and that's helped with like, you know, the nature of the digital world as well. Like people are more comfortable to be able to speak digitally instead of in person, and so a lot more conversations are being had, and I think a lot more people have the ability to just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna do whatever, actually.
Definitely. Because I wondered and I thought about it, you know, your book, many people will understand different parts of it and go, yeah, that's how I felt. Have you ever thought that your book could be something like a beacon of hope to someone who's afraid to speak out, and in reading your book under the covers at night with their mobile torch and go, God, if she can do this, I can do this. You know, have you ever given that any thought? Because like there's so many parts in your book that people can go, oh my God, you know, how did she do it? And, you know, she's written about it. And now I feel like I can do something and I can stand out and speak out, you know?
Well, to a certain extent, yes. And I think that's because that's what my magazine was doing.
Okay.
And because I already had received quite a lot of messages from people when Burning My Roti was starting until now saying, I want to start my own magazine, or I want to start my own community group, or whatever. Can you help me? And whether it's not even like a South Asian one or whatever, like I want to start this. Can you help me with this? And there's loads of people that have said already, because of Burning My Roti, I've been able to do this or talk about this. And Burning My Roti has been a platform that's allowed people, even anonymously, to talk about things that they haven't been able to outside of it. So I think that I've already had that like experience. But with my book, it was very personal. It was a lot more it was basically my story. So when that started happening, I think that was significant. That's because when I got those messages, I was just like, okay. I mean, there were a couple of times that I did a little cry. Like, even like my cousin, he read the book. Well, he's still reading it. Slow reader. He said to me the other day, he was just like, there were so many moments in the book that helped me feel less lonely from understanding things. And I was just like trying not to cry in front of him. Like, don't do that. Because when it is that close to you as well, when it's family, like that becomes a lot more real than people you haven't met before saying it, you know? So there have been like some significant moments, but you know what, it's interesting though, because like how much of that do you actually give to yourself? Because how much of that am I being like, oh Sharon, you did that, or am I being like, oh, that book did that? Because you create a disconnect, don't you?
Yeah, you do. But I think you've done it really well. Like for even for your relatives to go, because I feel like sometimes your relatives can be the most judgmental.
Yeah. Because they know you.
Or the most critical. So either they think you're this rebellious person that, you know, you're just being stubborn, or they go, oh, it's a phase or something. But when you have that one person, it doesn't have to be all of them, that one person that goes, you know what, I feel the same, or I understand that. That's when you feel like, you're not alone as well, you know? And
100%. And it's making an impact on the people you like love and care about. That's super important to me. Like it's so important to me to make an impact to people around the world, but it touches you more when it's someone that you love. That
definitely.
So
what does cultural...
He can't hear me right now because he's in his room.
Oh, he'll be crying maybe. It's like, I love this too. So like, I have to ask, what does cultural identity mean to you?
That's an interesting one. I don't actually know, because I think definitions change for everyone. They're all very different for everyone. My cultural identity is like, I guess, steeped in history and ancestors and homeland and archive, things that are lost, things yet to be found and discovered. So my cultural identity, I feel, is what I can make of myself from the way I exist now, and what I can learn about my ancestors and the way that I exist and why I exist the way I do. So it's not just being like, I'm British Indian, you know, there's so much more to it. There's so much more story to it that needs to be read and learned. So it's it's like an unread book with like loads of empty pages that I need to like fill up. So yeah, my cultural identity is still quite unknown. I think everyone's is, you know,
because like you, I don't go, I'm British Asian or I'm English, like, because sometimes because I like tick this box and tick this, you know, you tick the boxes and you're like, but what does it actually mean? And I've always, you know, like had this strong sexuality sense. I'm like thinking, is that because I'm Asian? Is it because it's ingrained into our DNA because of the whole history of India and, you know, the spirituality, etc. And then I like feel like, you know, eating with our hands was a reason for eating with our hand, because it's the senses, it's sexual, it's organic, it feels so sensual basically. And I'm like, I would love if there is anything, research back into that. But in India, where does sensuality of food and sexuality fit in together? Because there must be something. And for me,
Oh
that's what I
yeah,
really want to find out. Because,
oh my
you know,
God, do the research. Oh my God, write a book. Like, for real, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
there must be, because all of our paint, like you said, all of our sculptures and paintings, it's just, it's out there, and a lot of people, you know, shy away from it. But as a kid, I was wondering, thinking, why is it half a boobie out, or why is the nipple out, and why is it around food, or why is it around a man, or why is it like music, and why do we eat with our hands? And you know, for cultural identity, I would love to find out, is that part of our DNA that's passed down hundreds of generations, that's still there, you know? And that's something I would love to find out.
Absolutely. And I think food is so sexual in every culture, actually. Like, Indian food is so like flavorful and like spicy and, you know, interesting, and so many different types as well, different regions with land and like, you know, like farming and agriculture, and there's so much there as well, where you're kind of just like going through the history of it and looking at different areas and how it's kind of changed and how it kind of makes us the people we are, because all our recipes come down from like, you know, our families, right? So like, where were they when they were making this? You know, where did they get
behind it
from? And like, you know, why did they add this in suddenly, and that's why we eat it like this now? You know, things like that. Like, it's fascinating, and there's so much there. There's definitely like huge stories there as well.
I think so as well, because I always wanted to write something about sensuality and food, but related to Indian culture. And it's like, one of the things I loved was when I met Carlos, his best friend was also a mystery, so he was already exposed to Indian food. And his threshold of heat was way higher than mine, and probably more Asian than I am somewhere. And I remember when we first met, and I made chapatis, and then this was about 12 years ago, maybe 13. And he was, oh my God, this is magic. How did you make it, you know, poof? And I was like, I don't know, it works out well today, because normally it doesn't. But the thing I loved was, because I've never had this, but he was feeding me with his hands. And I was like, and when we do eat mussels or clams or whatever, he would also feed me with his hands, because it was a sharing experience. And now you understand, it's like a sensual, sexual, organic feeling where it just felt natural, where you feed each other, and you know,
100%.
I find it beautiful.
You know what's really interesting, so like, you know, you have like, when you think of royalty as well, and you think of like, you know, being surrounded by certain foods, and it was all very sexualized as well, but it was also to do with like wealth. So like, certain foods were the only ones that like rich people could afford, and it turned it into like something quite sexual, because it was kind of like, no one else can get this, you know, you have to be a certain person to be able to get this, and it's like, oh, that's so sexy and hot kind of thing, you know. So it's kind of related to that as well. Like, it's like how, like, you know, Europeans, what they do with caviar, like, you know, it's that concept, but like, you know, in Indian culture, a lot of the time it was certain spices and stuff.
That's true.
That's really fascinating. And I think like eating with hands is so like, it is incredibly like sexual. It is incredibly
beautiful. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I remember when I met, this is before I dated my husband, because we got together because of his sister, and his sister was my friend from school. And when I met their grandmother, the first thing I noticed about her, so she would have been in her 80s, it was her hands, because she always made sure her hands were well maintained and manicured. And then you see her eat. So I wasn't looking at her face, it's the hands, because you see it's such a beautiful like butterfly movement. And I was like, oh, this is so nice. And then, you know, when I used to go see her, a lot of northern food of Spain is very different, very like stews and hot dishes sort of thing. But when I was down or I was ill, the family would feed me like with the hand, and I was like, I've never had that in the UK. Like, and we're Asians, like South Asians, and we eat with our hands. And they were like, yeah, but Anisha, you cooked for us, so you're going to feed you. And I'm like, huh? And it was such a lovely, there was intimacy, and you know, I was feeling really low, and the uncle was like, Anisha, open your mouth, and I opened my mouth, and he's feeding me food, and I was like, there was intimacy and trust, and there's so many levels that you can have, I think, you know.
definitely. And it's also like, you know, when you eat like roti and sabji and you're just like, you just go like that and you eat it,
Yeah.
and then you're like, maybe you make it for like a white person or something like that, and they're struggling to like tear off the roti and get the sabji on, and you realize that you've got this pattern in the way you do it, and there's this smooth motion,
Yeah.
and you grab enough, you grab the perfect amount, and like, you know, and other people will struggle. And yeah, it's an interesting kind of like,
But I don't think you've
um,
realised your hands are very sexual because of your tattoos as well.
yeah.
When you move, it's like it's really like flamenco-y. Like,
Yeah, well, like
yeah.
that's how, like that, like right now,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's a light bulb movement. It's
I know.
flamenco.
I'm very attracted to hands as well. Like that's a thing for me, and I think that's why I decorated my hands with tattoos as well, and I get my nails done with different colors as well, because I find hands beautiful and fascinating, and it really kind of, I feel I like watching people, what people do with their hands as well, like the way they, because I'm very much a speaker with my
With
hands.
this, yeah, me too.
Yeah. Um, and so like I notice when other people do as well, and I find it really, it's like almost like a dance that they do when they're talking, or like, you know, the way that they act, and I find it fascinating. So I like hands anyway, so when that's involved in eating, like, you know, that adds to the sexuality of it all.
Okay,
Yeah.
that actually leads me to my next question. Sexuality for me is a very broad term. Okay, what does it represent for you? Because I believe you can have feelings for more than one person. I don't necessarily believe your soulmate is your husband, not for anything. And I always think of sexuality because I always compare it to the Trojans or the Romans, because you know, in war you would sleep, you know, the Trojans would, I think it was the Trojan that would sleep with the person next to them, because you know, you're tightly packed, so you're there to protect one another. And the Romans are the same, you know. But nowadays it's like, oh god, you know, there's not so much taboo around that. But what does sexuality mean for you? Like,
I think it's very personal. I don't think it should involve another person. I think I think sexuality conversations tend to end up being about a partner or a relationship or sex. And sexuality is just you. Like it's just your individual self, right? And so when it's aligned, that's why like bisexuality is such an issue for so many people, because they're just like, well, when you're in a hetero passing relationship, even though you're queer, then are you really queer? Like, are you really bisexual, kind of thing? And it's just like, but that partner doesn't define the person. So sexuality to me is just another extension of yourself, your identity, the way that you exist, live, the way that you go through your own journey. Like, for example, like we said at the beginning of the talk, like the journey of my body hair was through my sexuality. And so that was very personal, individual to me. And so, yeah, I don't align it to a person or a partner or a future relationship or sex. I don't relate to sexuality, even though it has the word in it. It doesn't mean that it's a big in it. It's just about the way you see yourself and how you go.
But I think you're right. It's what I said. It's a broad term, and a lot of people, like you said, define it to sexual, like to sex and partners.
Yeah.
But sexuality is how that person, for me, carries themselves off. You know, I remember years ago, you know, in Granada, like they do lots in the little plazas, they do like flamenco or like, you know, salsa dancing. And there was this old couple, and the woman had so much sass, and she was fully like, she would have been in her 70s. But Carlos and I were drawn to her. We were like, gosh, she's so beautiful, because she had this energy and aura about her that was like, I'm in my 70s, but I know I've still got it. Like, you know, the way she carried herself off, she was so confident, and the smile and how she presented herself, everything was like this whole package. And it was so captivating to watch, because my eyes were just on her, because I was like, damn, like she's amazing. And I believe it's how you are as a person, and how the decisions you make affect how you are, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, you know, I truly believe that heterosexuality is forced on you. I don't believe that like heterosexuality is the norm at all. I think that like a more kind of like bisexual, pansexual kind of like attitude is kind of the more natural way of living. So if people have attraction outside of the gender that they've been told that they're meant to have attraction to, then that's more natural than just liking one gender, you know? I feel like that's kind of very restrictive. It kind of like stops you from experiencing full life and understanding yourself through it as well. Because when you can have connections with people on certain levels, despite what gender identity they have, then you learn more about yourself and you grow as a person. And I think that that's kind of like more important to me. And I think that's what I do as well. I make connections with as many people as possible to grow myself and for them to grow as well. So that the journey of growing individually can be with the person, but like you benefit from it.
Yeah, no, I believe that. Because no, because there was this one person that I met on my trip to when I see Alicante, and I always told Carlos, I was like, this person, you know, when you can't stop talking and you surround yourself by people that you really can really like could be yourself with, you know, there's no shame or whatever. And I asked to Carlos, there's something about this person, we can't stop talking, and I always wondered, thinking, could he be a soulmate? Because he wasn't actually my husband, but it was just a conversation and everything, we were just aligned, and I wasn't drawn to him sexually or anything like that, but it was just I was captivated by this one person because it was so interesting to be around. But it made me feel better because I was like, oh, I feel the same way, and
and I think that's it, right? Like it's having those connections and being drawn to certain people. I think that's kind of more important than being like, I'm this identity or whatever.
Like, or labeling yourself.
I have these connections with all these different types of people, and these connections could be anything, and it's important for people to like extend their humanity beyond one gender, you know, because like I think that comes alongside with it, and I think that's why there's so much kind of like homophobia and transphobia, is because your empathy and humanity ends with one gender. You're told to just love this one, and then the rest are just like weird to you or whatever. So I think when you extend beyond that, then that kind of stuff starts to fade.
I think so, because like going on from that, because you're surrounding yourself by these sort of people that are supportive. It's like a network, you know, you hold them close because it also encourages your journey as well. You know, because I believe that if you surround yourself by positive people, it does help you a lot more than surrounding yourself by negative and judgmental people. But once you start to let go, everything kind of flows better. And which has led me to, you know, your career is slightly different, but your career has been in you're a director of Burning My Roti, and then you got the Middlesex Pride, I think it is, and there's another one. So you've kind of immersed yourself in different areas. So for many, you are an inspirational leader because they're like, oh my God, she's done this, she's done this, she's done this. But to help people through different journeys and situations and moments to go through at that stage of their life, because of that as well, have any opportunities come your way that have been life-changing for you?
Oh, literally every opportunity. Like even like anything. Like I think people are just like, oh, do you have this big thing that's come your way that's changed? Like anything. This conversation, like everything I have that is something where I connect with someone, or when I can get a message across, anything, I'm like, this is amazing. Like this is like made a significant dent in the way that I can now move, you know. A lot of the time it's certain every conversation I have is different, you know. Everything I've been part of is different, and so there's a different bit of me showing in each one. And when I reveal that little bit more of myself, it's significant for me to be like, now there's that little bit more open, there's that little bit more that changes. So like literally anything and everything, but that's very vague and not what you asked.
So. No, but it's true, because like some people define lifetime opportunity that is this big thing. But
and I don't
know why.
I don't like that, because also that then isolates people that are just like, oh, we haven't had this thing that happened, you know, we weren't on this list, or we didn't get this opportunity, that kind of stuff. And it really those things are so meaningless. They're so meaningless in comparison to like
all the little journeys and steps you've
all
taken.
the little journeys that lead you to, like, you can have one big journey and then not really reach your goal or have a significant change in your life because of it, or you can have loads of significant little moments that build you as a person, and that build other people around you as well. And that's so much more important. That, like, honestly, like, big things that could come your way a lot of the time are meaningless.
It is true, because as well, people define themselves by that one big thing, and then they're setting themselves up to fail, because then you think that all the little things are like worthless. You know, but
then you're setting other people up to fail as well, because then they compare. What you have to do as well is, if you're out there being like, you know, I want to represent people, I want people to feel safe, and then you're like, yeah, but I've got this, then you're isolating them, because they'll be like, well, we'll never get that, so we're not, you know. And it's like, why would you do that? Like,
no, but it's I agree, because I feel like the little steps are the best steps, because it's like a self-accomplishment of, I've done this, brilliant, I've done this, brilliant, as opposed to going, oh my god, I don't have it like a TV show, and I'm not a size 10, and I'm not a size this, or it's like you're defining yourself by expectations that are not realistic.
Yeah, and even career expectations are ridiculous as well, and especially for women and women of color and queer women of color. Like, it's all ridiculous. Like, set your own goals, have your own expectations, don't get led by someone else's. And then it'll just kind of, your own goals then are more reachable, and then you'll feel more fulfilled and more satisfied, you know.
And I absolutely agree with that, because I'm like, yes, because that's how I feel. You just took the words out of my mouth. So.
I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, I want to reach the goals that Madonna reached. Like, that's crazy talk. Like, no, I want to reach the goals that I want to attain as an individual person that will fulfill me, you know. And it was writing a book, and that is quite a huge goal, and that's been huge for me. And so I took a massive step back after writing it and didn't do much work to take a break.
You have to mentally, you have to take a break.
Holy crap, yeah, I needed it desperate, because I just put all my trauma into a book and was just like, okay, I need to go sleep for like 2 weeks, please.
But also park it, because I'm one of those people that when you work so hard at something, you've accomplished this book, but then you need to take a step back, close that book and go, okay, now I need to take like a pause and go 2-3 weeks, disconnect, and then come back to it, you know, because then you really appreciate it. And
you have to remember to keep loving what you're doing as well, and so you have to take care of your health through it, otherwise everyone else won't love it, you know.
Right, true. Definitely. Like, so I have to ask, I want to talk about your childhood. And well, I hope you like the question. And many South Asian households surround themselves by food, your favorite dishes, etc. And it's those meal times is where you really converse with them. You know, you talk about things that happen. Were you able to talk openly with your family about the thoughts that you were going through and the situations you were going through in life? Like, was it like an open situation where you can go, okay, I can look at your faces, like, if I didn't see this video, they were like, what? Really? She's doing a caterpillar eyes.
Genuinely, you know what, it's so funny when I see that happening with other families, or I see it in like films or TV or whatever, I'm just like, oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that a nice little fictional story? Because I never experienced that. Like, every time me and my family when I was young, would have sat down for a meal, a lot of the time it would have been a silent meal, you know, or like, you know, the parents would have something to say, and usually it was just have you done your homework, or like, you know, stuff like that. So like, dinner time was never really a sharing time for us. But like, cooking time was. When you sat down and ate, you would do it in silence, and you had to eat all your food, and you had to be good, and, you know, all of that stuff. But cooking was more chaotic, so there was more allowance there, you know. So like, when mum would have the massive pressure cooker and make saag, like, the whole thing would be so much chaos that you would be running around, there'd be music playing and stuff like that. And then you can kind of like act a fool kind of thing, you know, be your natural self. But when you sat down to eat, that was different. Then you had to like be this like good Indian girl. It's like, am I eating like properly? Like, you know, that kind of nonsense, you know. So I never really experienced like sharing while eating in a family environment.
Okay.
It became something that, like, I realized that that's why people go to restaurants with friends. That's why people go for dinner. I realized much later on is because that's where they sit down and chat. And I had been taught that you don't talk while you eat. Don't talk with a mouthful. Don't talk while you eat. You know, finish all your food, and then, you know, then you can remember you have to clean the dishes. And like, it was regimented a certain way.
Yeah.
And so now eating is like, eating with people, eating out is just so much more fun and interesting for me, because that's where I catch up with people.
Yeah.
That's where I have fun. That's where I gossip. Tell them all, like, you know, the updates of my love life, all that fun, you know. And it's over food, and it's a lot more of a beautiful experience for me now. That's why I love cooking now as well.
Okay.
I love cooking for people so that we can sit down and chat.
No, but that's what I love. Like, you know, that's a massive thing here in the Mediterranean culture. Meal times are the longest because you sit, you converse, you chat, you talk about everything, and like you talk about like literally everything. Like, I remember my husband's grandmother, but we weren't married then, and I remember she was so independent, and it was. I remember her saying to me once, we're doing something in the kitchen because everyone's around their like stove, and Carla said, "Yeah, but I've got Anisha," and then like Welly went, No, you've not got her. What makes you think you've got her? You're not married. You've not put a ring on it. She's independent. She can have other options. And I was like, go, Welly. I was like, yeah, like, and you know, she was talking about affection and relationships, and that's something, you know, coming from the UK, it's what you said. Oh, don't chew with your mouth open, or don't speak with your mouth open. Sorry, or don't chew with your mouth open, and you know. But then it's really because I have two sides. Like growing up in the UK, in Leicestershire, we spoke a lot when we had family get-togethers. Everyone's together, eating, chomping, whatever, and you're having proper conversations. But generally, it wasn't a done thing where you talk. But then on my mum's side, meal times were always about talking. You're mischievous, you're nattering, but it wasn't the sort of conversations where you can go talk open. Like, I think it's the thing. There's like a limit to things you can talk a lot, but you can't talk about. You know, today I kissed this girl. They were like, "You did what?" Like, it's not those sort of conversations. Whereas here in Spain, we've spoken about everything, you know, nudist beaches. Like, we go to this nudist beach. I mean that aren't always go. We used to go back in the day, and you know, I cuddle my husband all the time in bed, and you know, when you're older, it's not about sex. It's about, you know, compassion and affection and, you know, intimacy, but not through the sexualized aspects. And I'm like, wow, I've never had these conversations over dinner time where I'm from, but it's just the difference.
No matter where you're sitting, even if you're sitting with food, it's still stigmatized.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to talk about it, you know. It doesn't make it easier for them to follow. Like,
but do you think that's inspired you to become a writer? To be, you know, to share your feelings?
Yeah, probably actually. Being told that I wasn't allowed to have feelings or like share feelings. Yeah, I guess that's a big thing. I would immerse myself in TV and film a lot, to, like, you know, like almost like a fantasy state. Like I would go into a fantasy land and I would immerse myself in that. So I found storytelling very fascinating, and the ability to tell stories in a subtle way as well, that would give an impact when it was having certain conversations. So it wasn't kind of just like, we're going to talk about race through this racial issue. We're going to, like, you know, subtly like talk about it in this weird fantasy land we've created, kind of thing. I'd be like, whoa, that's cool. That's so interesting. And I think that's the kind of stuff that drove me to it, because I really did want to talk loads, because as you can tell, I'm very talkative. I've always wanted to talk loads. But then being told that, you know, you can't really talk about this or that, you can't really have those discussions, I was just like, what? So yeah, I think that was like a big part of me wanting to write, definitely.
Okay. But yeah, because you see it a lot in your writing, which, by the way, I'm reading a lot of your articles. So socially and emotionally, eating creates long-lasting bonds, because you're conversing and sharing over food. It's like an intimate thing, you know, like we were saying before about your hands and food and movement. Through your friendships and your life, you know, in recent years, over food, have you created long-lasting bonds with people that you've gone, you're in my life, and you know,
yeah,
can we share stuff together?
most definitely. Like, I have like a group of friends, we go to restaurants all the time, and like we also have our favorites that we go to, and like, you know, I then have like the friends where I'm just like, let's go eat dirty, and we go have a dirty food kind of
Oh,
like
nice.
relationship. Those are my favorites. Like, yeah, I
It's
know,
just made me think of chili chips and cheese from off a night
macaroni and
out.
cheese,
Yeah.
like, you know, let's eat the dirtiest food we can find. So like, yeah, you create these connections with people, and I feel like it opens different parts of you. You know, you have the kind of, let's go, like, you know, with my vegan friends, let's go find like the coolest new vegan restaurant, or like, you know, you go with people that eat meat and then you find the vegan thing in the menu to eat yourself, kind of thing. And so you have all these different connections with these different people, and the different ways that they eat, and you know, the different ways that they see the world. And yeah, it's bonded me very differently with significant groups of people. Yeah, and I've enjoyed that kind of like journey.
That's amazing. Like, because you've got a gift for storytelling by talking as well as writing. Okay, you got it dialed. You really have. My last question is, for anyone that wants to pursue storytelling and writing, what tips would you give them, or one vital tip you would give them?
I think one of the main things, I'm sorry if you can hear music in the background.
I can't hear it, so it's all good.
Okay.
Unless you can hear flamenco in the background, you're all good.
Okay, perfect. So one of the main things that I think a lot of it was like, there's self-doubt there. So I think one of the most important things for any writer to realize is that whatever they have to say is important. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, it's important. Someone out there wants that story or wants to hear it. You know, someone, like, even if it's a story about, like, I don't know, a bird that gets lost and has to find its way back home. I don't know. I think I've just written a Pixar film there. Like,
someone listening.
Someone out there wants that story, you know.
Yeah.
Even if it's about your journey, your personal story, like I did, someone out there wants that. So no matter what you think, anything you write, someone out there wants it. So don't doubt what you're writing. You know, I think that's one big thing I had, where I was just like, does anyone want this? Does anyone care? Like, is this just for me, really, more than anything? And so yeah, I think that was a big move for me to kind of recognize that.
Well done, you. Really, it's like inside I'm going like a seal. That's what I'm thinking. But yeah, like, because like I was saying, like your chapters in your book, and even the things you write generally online, I'm like, damn, like for me, it's like, oh gosh, you've done it. Oh, that's so true. But it's, you have a gift for talking as well as writing. For me.
Oh, thank you.
But I think
so
other
sweet.
people.
Okay, I'm blushing. I'm actually blushing.
No, you're fine. You're all good. You're just a blusher. And so for me, I think it's just been amazing, because I think your journey has resonated with a lot of people. You know, where you can go, oh yeah, like that's how she's done it. She's done it, and you know, you get your support out there. And you know, I live in another country, and I was like, oh my god, like, this girl's amazing. And I would speak to you about, I spoke about you to my friends here, and I was like, God, you gotta follow her, like she's so good. But for me, it's like, oh god, so many things that I went through as a teenager that you shared, and I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. So
I'm glad you got that feeling from it. I think that's so important for me, that people get that.
Yeah, because it's not like, you know, like books you get, self-help books. It's not a self-help book.
Oh,
It's more of a book where you go, oh yeah, I'm not alone. And if she's done it, I can do it. Like, it's not one of those things where it's like, you know, these mental books where you go, oh, it's a journey and this is what you need to do. It's more like you're sharing something that other people go, yes, that's so true. Yeah. I've done that. I've gone through that, not in the same way, but something similar. And I think that's been amazing, you know.
I'm so glad. The last thing I wanted to write was a self-help book, so I'm
I
glad.
don't have time for that. That's another day, another story.
Yeah, imagine me giving self-help. It's like, no, thanks, no.
I think there'll be a lot of beeps, and I'll be like, oh, that's how I talk, really.
Yeah.
And with my British sense of humour. But anyway, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see what you'll be doing in Vancouver. Really, I'm on your Instagram, like, this is amazing.
Thank you. This has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for having it with me. And yeah, like totally watch my journey in Vancouver. It's mostly going to be trying to date as many people as possible. I'm not.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let me just stop recording.